I actually really kind of wanted to start with um, talking about you and your career. Can you kind of outline the career that has led you into filmmaking?
Oh boy. I mean, it's just like so nebulous and but I started off, I feel like I imprinted on the movie Almost Famous like way too hard when I was a teenager. So I started off writing a lot of music reviews. Like I kind of started my career as a music journalist when I was 18, writing for kind of like local all weeklies in Toronto. And then I did an internship at Spin Magazine when I was 20 and dropped out of school to kind of be a freelance music journalist, in the early, I don't know, or late 2010, 20, like from kind of 2007 to 2009, like the heyday of like, I don't know, Vampire Weekend and stuff. And then, and I worked at iWeekly, which was kind of like Toronto's equivalent of the Village Voice or something. And then, I got fired and I needed like 2 credits left to graduate. I'd gone to film school, at the University of Toronto, but it was like so theoretical, so I like never saw a camera. And in my last year, there was the screenwriting class that was being taught by Patricia Rosema, who's an incredible Canadian filmmaker, and this really brilliant writer named Semi Chellis, who ended up writing all the best episodes of Mad Men. So just I feel like I was just this kind of like fate, and having those 2 women kind of as inspirations and sort of mentors for me was really incredible. And that's kinda how I started getting into screenwriting. And then, I went to the Canadian Film Center, which is like Norman Jewison's film school in Canada, kind of like our version of AFI, and did screenwriting there. And then from there, started directing a lot of music videos for this, punk band Pup in, Toronto. And then that kinda led me to, making my first short film in 2017, and then this movie in 2021. So it was kind of a long journey, but all that way I've kind of been doing kind of some weird combination of like cultural criticism, music video, short filmmaking, and then also um, writing these screenplays on the side.
So this is what makes you one of the people that I've been most interested in talking to for the past few months, is because of this very interesting combination of things that you do, and things that I'm like interested in. Obviously I do film criticism, journalism. I like movies, I like music, and just seeing how you've been able to like weave all of that into a career that has led you here to I like movies. A movie, by the way, that's still sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I could only dream. I know, right? I should knock on wood. Let's keep it that way, right? No, it's a
Yeah.
really good movie, and I
Thank you
love that
so
people.
much.
Yeah, I love that people are loving it so much, and we're going to talk about it. Can you tell people who are not aware yet what I Like Movies is about?
I guess I always say it's about a very pretentious teenage cinephile who gets a job at a corporate video store in his last year of high school, where he develops a really complicated friendship with his older female manager at the store.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really concise way to put it, but there is certainly a lot that goes into this movie, especially when it comes to film appreciation and kind of the homage to to, um, to films and also to Canada and Canadian lifestyle. So that's always fun to see, especially I'm American here in the States, but I pop up to Vancouver all the time. It was awesome seeing the Cineplex in the in the movie. Loved that. But yeah, it's such a fun movie, I think, to watch, but also kind of an emotional roller coaster. There's a lot to react to when it comes to this particular character. I think in previous interviews that I've seen with you, you've talked about how this movie really is kind of like telling your own story through this lens. Do you want to like elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like I did grow up in Burlington, Ontario, which I guess I've now put on the map cinematically. And I did work at Blockbuster, and I was pretty obnoxious as a high school student. So I think there was something about being able to swap the genders, that made it a really safe space to maybe go like more personal, and than I would maybe feel comfortable with if there was just kind of a straight line from like A to B between me and
Hmm.
the protagonist. And I really recommend that to people, like just change the gender of your protagonist and then nobody will know how truthful it is. But I think also, there's something about the Atlanta character too, and the fact that I was kind of
Hmm.
writing it as a woman in my 30s, but then sort of thinking a lot about high school. And I feel like, in a way, the movie sort of, for me, kind of represents this idea of like, if you met your high school self as an adult, like, what would you think of that person, and what would that person think of you? And
Hmm.
do you think that you would be sort of happy with the choices your future self had made, and how much like cringe or empathy do you feel for kind of like past versions of yourself, and in what way are you still that person now?
Hmm.
And I don't know, I'm really interested in that idea. And also, as someone whose entire life has been governed by popular culture and this very deep relationship I have to movies and music, and especially in high school where those things were extremely primal and kind of like all I had to kind of like reinvent myself or give me this sort of vision of the kind of person I wanted to become. I think so much has changed in the way that we relate to physical media, and obviously it's not the same anymore. But I think teenagers are still as obsessed with movies and music and film as ever. And I just kind of wanted to like pay homage, I guess, to kind of the last great moment in cinephilia, which was the corporate video store.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot that we could talk about if we were, you know, having drinks at a bar. I would love to like continue this conversation for a long time. But when it comes to you making this film, I do wonder, like when you set out to make the film, what were your aspirations? Like, were you wanting to win awards for it? Were you just making it for fun? Were you trying to connect with that particular audience? Like, what was the inspiration or maybe the aspirations that you were hoping to achieve when you started at the beginning, and how this movie has rolled out?
Yeah, I certainly had no expectations. I wasn't, thinking of what my Oscar speech was gonna be for my $125,000 Canadian movie. Um, but, I think for me, it was just about sort of, giving myself permission to make a film. I feel like I spent my whole life really wanting to be an artist, but kind of burying it and repressing it, and feeling like, the closest thing I could sort of get towards the filmmakers and artists that I totally worship was by interviewing them or writing about their art. And in a way that's kind of a safe kind of adjacent space, because you don't have to take the kind of personal risks and sacrifice to actually, make something. But I was getting older and older, and more unhappy. And I remember when um Greta Gerwig made Lady Bird. I mean, I guess I am like you know, a sort of white lady in my 30s, so obviously that film really spoke to me. But I just remember thinking like, "Oh, this is the first time that I've really felt like I've seen something that's like super embodied the kind of like tone and way I would want to make art, and every way that she kind of talked about, this chance that she gave herself to direct and write something personal to her." And I would just watch like the behind the scenes video of her, like the A24 BTS video of her, like, directing in, like, a big sun hat, and I would just, like, cry because I just wanted to make a movie so badly. So, I think for me, the whole impetus and expectation was just, like, give yourself permission to make a film. And in Canada, we had this grant called Talent Watch, where, it's a $125,000 arts grant that you don't have to give back, that's issued through this organization called Telefilm. And it's interesting because I think the sort of conversation about Canadian cinema, it's always been dominated by like Adam McGoyan, David Cronenberg, Sarah Polley, and it's like there's kind of like nobody thinks of there's any other directors, maybe Denis Villeneuve and Jean-Marc Vallée and Xavier Dolan, but like that's it kind of stops and ends there. And I think the greatest films that are being produced in the country right now are being made with this $125,000 arts grant, and it just gives you an incredible opportunity to like make something that really sounds and feels like you. And that's really all I wanted to do. I kind of just wanted to treat it like a second film school where I could write something that was in my exact tone of voice, and work with great actors and just sort of give myself permission to figure out what kind of director I wanted to be, how I wanted to work with people, the kinds of stories I want to tell, my voice and tone, I guess, comedically. So that's all I was really thinking about. And, before we got into TIFF, I applied to maybe 10 film festivals and was like rejected by it. So I think there was like a really dark point where I was like, maybe no one's ever going to see this at all. I mean, maybe that's it. So I think I really then wasn't expecting the kind of roller coaster ride that I've been on since September of being able to travel over the world. And I think especially coming out of the pandemic, just being able to watch it with like actually fully sold out, packed audiences is also just so remarkable too, and really engage with people in real life about the project. So yeah, I'm like deeply appreciative and moved by everything that I've gotten to experience over the last 6 months, but it's been yeah, quite a ride.
I was bummed that I missed it at TIFF, but I was privileged enough to have been able to watch it with a Canadian audience in Vancouver when it played at the Vancouver
Oh,
Film
that's so
Festival,
awesome.
which you spoke at, and so it was cool watching you talk
Which
there.
which screening were you at?
Oh, was that the final day's screening? I think because in
Oh,
it,
that was so much fun. I feel like that's like the best screening it's ever played. Like I felt like I
yeah,
made the movie so I could have that screening. It was
it
awesome.
was it was very wonderful to be a part of. But it did make me wonder. Now that the movie has done kind of this global tour, I have wondered what if you've noticed any differences in reaction between Canadian audiences and American or international audiences.
That's such a great question. Yeah, like it's so funny how in Canada some of the really specific cultural references, like when she's like, "Oh, where'd you get those earrings?" "Oh, Le Chateau." Like it kills like you're watching like, I don't know, a show at the Apollo or something like
Right.
for those audiences, like all the Canadian really deep cut references. "Ooh, jokes in Ottawa," like they just absolutely destroy. But then like we were the closing night film at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and it was
Mhm.
just like total crickets. So and then in Taiwan, it felt like they had a totally different reaction to it, and, like, things like the masturbation scene when, his mom walks in on Lawrence masturbating while he's watching Spartacus, like, for some reason, that was, like, the funniest thing they'd ever seen or, like, fully shocking to them, but then other people, it's just kind of, like, mild titters, so I don't know, and then I remember I just showed it in, Owen Sound, which is, like, a small town in, Southwestern Ontario, and it was, like, at 11 a.m., and the screening was full of, like, 85-year-olds. And they just, like, didn't seem to like the movie at all, so every audience is different, which I appreciate.
That is very special, and it's nice it's interesting, I'm sure, to be able to experience that. And like I said, there's a lot of nuance with the film and a lot of cultural references, and things like that. And so it's fun that you've been able to kind of see those differences between audiences. Um, I am very excited for my friends here in Seattle to finally get around to seeing it. Um, I Like Movies is the closing film for the Seattle International Film Festival, which I was so excited to hear when that was announced. What is the significance to you of this movie closing out the Seattle Film Festival?
Oh, man, I mean, it's incredible. I've heard about the festival for many years, and everyone tells me that it's one of the, premier film festivals in the US, market, and has a really great tradition of programming, incredible indie films. So, for this my first feature to be the closing night movie there is an incredible honor. I can't wait to go to the Egyptian Theater. And I mean, I think just Seattle, like the culture of Seattle, is so significant to me. Just in terms of like the grunge scene and like incredible artists that have come out of there. I can't wait to kind of maybe walk around and go to some singles shooting locations. The last time I was in Seattle, I literally like went to Kurt Cobain's house and sat on the bench that he used to sit on, and so I don't know, I just think that people, just like West Coast culture, but specific Pacific Northwest culture and the really great tradition of writers and artists and filmmakers that are from Seattle is huge. And so yeah, I can't wait to see how people respond to it. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I can't wait either. So one topic that I wanted to talk about, kind of what I alluded to at the beginning, is the fact that I want to talk to you about being a journalist for entertainment, now entering or having entered into the filmmaking space. And I guess I want to know what that transition was like, you having been one to report on entertainment and now being the one making the entertainment.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I feel like I'm still personally trying to figure it out. Like I have a bit of an identity complex now because I'm like, what, do I call myself a filmmaker? I still want to review movies, but you know, if I'm like pitching to someone who wants me to like punch up the dialogue for Angry Birds 4 and I trash Angry Birds 3 as a critic, what position do I find myself in? Um and so I don't know. I mean, I remember I had a friend and they were like, "Oh, you don't have to worry about it. Like think of all the great filmmakers of like Cahiers du Cinema and how they managed to be critics and filmmakers. Think of people like Paul Schrader and Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut and I was like, "Yeah, but they're not doing the kind of, they're not reviewing like Hellboy and it's just they're like coming up with the theory of like auteur theory and stuff.
Great.
But I personally just feel like, I don't want to stop being a critic. I don't want to stop interviewing filmmakers and talking about cinema because I think having made a movie, I've learned so much about the craft of it. I think I've developed so much more empathy um as a critic because I not only know how hard it is to make any movie and any movie that gets made is like an actual miracle, but any if you can make a good movie on top of that, it's an even rarer feat as well. And I think that just the practice of filmmaking, maybe all critics should be filmmakers or at least try it.
No, that's something that I have more recently, especially been thinking about. I mean, the more that I talk about filmmakers or I talk with filmmakers about, movies, the more empathy that I get, because I have not made a movie and I cannot imagine yet how hard that is. I mean, I can try, but, the more I talk with filmmakers and people who work on movies, the more I realize how difficult of a thing it is to do. And I respect the craft more and more every time I have these kind of discussions, which I guess leads me kind of into the next question, where how has this process of making I Like Movies impacted, I guess, how you approach film criticism and journalism?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I mean, I think, clearly I read every review. I am obsessively checking my letterbox. So certainly I don't have any kind of safe boundaries from it the way that maybe other filmmakers do where they kind of keep it at a distance, right? But
Right.
it is strange to kind of be on the other side of it and have people be able to say anything about something that you worked on and they all have their individual interpretations. I guess what I've realized is that a lot of the critical feedback I've received hasn't really it's kind of rare, I think, maybe in the way that this current state of journalism is to actually get a critical assessment that's of your film. Like it just feels like many critics are kind of reciting the press release or they're kind of repeating what someone else has already said. So it's made me kind of feel a little bit like the criticism has been a loss because I do want to have sort of a engaged feedback of and have that kind of direct relationship, I guess. But then every so often someone will review the movie in a really beautiful astute way, and there's been also critics like calling out some of the production failures or things in the film that I noticed, and I was like, "Thank you, actually, for validating me," because I said that on set the whole time, and everyone told me it wouldn't be a big deal. So actually, I appreciate that you mentioned that. um, but I think it's always really exciting when people want to engage with something that you worked on. I mean, even if they don't like it. The only thing I would say that sucks sometimes is, sometimes people are like, I'm scheduled to do an interview and they're like, "Oh, I haven't seen the film." And I'm like, "Oh, well, we
Ah,
can schedule
you
this."
you just tweeted about this
Yeah.
about a week ago, a little less than a week
Yeah.
ago. I was going to ask.
Yeah, they're like, and then they're like, "Well, I don't need to see the film to talk about it. I watched the trailer." And I'm like, Well, I'd prefer it if you watch it and then we can talk about it. And they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. And so I don't know. Personally, I find that one thing that's like maybe a bridge too far. I know that people are really busy, but like please watch the film if you're gonna talk to me about it or review it.
Absolutely.
I
No,
would think that would be like a normal thing to ask, but apparently it's not, and I think those people should be ashamed of themselves.
yeah, I would agree. I think that can't have a comprehensive conversation about the movie if you have not seen the movie. Well, thank you for addressing that because I was thinking about bringing it up. But we're coming close to the end of our time. Maybe a couple minutes over, but I have just a couple more questions,
Yeah, of course. It's okay.
maybe short responses. The film has released limitedly in Canada, correct? What are the prospects of US distribution?
Yeah, we have a really great sales agent who's kind of trying to broker a US deal in the States, because it's really my dream that it'll get released theatrically there, and that US audiences will have access to it, outside of all the great film festivals that have played it. I really think, having that I think that Rio screening that we were both at really spoke to the fact that this is like a cult movie that really, deserves to be kind of seen by young audiences, and kind of have that word of mouth. And feel like if this movie got released in the 90s or early 2000s, it could have that sort of that leverage. And I really wanted to have a physical DVD release as well. I feel like that would be like such a brutal irony if I Like Movies never was released on DVD. Um
That was going to be my next question. I love that you're following where I'm going with this. Yeah, I think that it would be so appropriate to have a physical media release for the film at
yeah,
some point.
I want to have like a blooper reel and
Yeah.
do a little director's commentary. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a really challenging time. There's so many great um Canadian films that have come out this year, like Rice Boy Sleeps and
Hmm.
my friend's film You Can Live Forever. And we're some of those movies, they're just not getting released in US theaters, or they're playing in New York for a weekend and then just
Hmm.
disappearing after that. And I think that's really unfortunate, because I feel like just speaking from my own country and the filmmaking community that I'm a part of, there's a lot of really excellent Canadian movies that shouldn't just be regulated to Canadian audiences watching them, but really deserve like a worldwide, but especially US career and leverage. And I feel like there's a lot of those filmmakers that really deserve to kind of be known by US audiences, and be able to make films in the States too. So yeah, I just hope that, I hope that it'll happen for me. It's sad, and how rare it seems to be for, but I look at like my friends who made Blackberry, and I feel
Yes.
like that gives me a lot of hope too, because there's just a full page review by Anthony Lane in the New Yorker with like a big illustration of Matt Johnson. And so that gives me, I look to people like Matt and I go like, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can. And I wish you the best going forward in your career. I wish this movie the best. I really hope to see US distribution some point soon. But yeah, I guess we will wait to see how everything unfolds. So in the
That's
meantime,
thank
yeah,
you.
of course. In the meantime, we in Seattle get to see it as the closing night film on Sunday. And so, like I said, I'm really excited for this audience and this market to be able to experience this film, and then we can talk about it and hopefully, garner a whole lot more love for it.